If you'd like to stand just because you've been sitting, that's fine, but you don't need to stand for me. And for those of you who are curious, Bob actually delivered the introduction exactly as it was presented to him, so he clearly knows how to follow instructions, which is good to know. Did you say you wrote that? No, I didn't. You didn't write that, okay. So first of all, thank you very much for the chance to be here today, and thank you for your investment in the community and especially your investment in the Commonwealth. As Bob said at the end of his remarks, this is about jobs and it's about success, but it's also about discovery and inquiry and game-changing opportunities to improve the lives of so many people, not just here in Massachusetts, but around the world. And I say that because this morning I attended a ribbon-cutting ceremony at Abiomed, which is a medical device manufacturer in Danvers. And I know the guys there and the gals there. I've known them for a long time. And I've watched that company over time go through what I would describe as sort of 3 or 4 different stages of development. The company itself was started in, well, it's 35 years ago, so sort of sometime in the early 1980s. And it was originally in the business of trying to build an artificial heart. Not a small task, very aspirational, significantly ahead of its time. Now, over the course of several years, they learned a lot of things, and they took the things they learned, and they did what many companies do in the life science space, which is they pivoted, and they realized that the stuff that they were working on probably was going to take them in this direction instead of that one. And they went from being in the business of thinking about artificial hearts to thinking about heart recovery. Now, one of the great things about the healthcare world, and I came out of it, so I'm guilty of it, is we create all kinds of catchphrases that no one except people in healthcare can possibly understand what they mean. And health recovery was this notion that if they could create a mechanism that could take the pressure of pumping blood off of a heart when a heart is actually going through a catastrophic event, they would be able to limit the damage associated with that catastrophic event and make it possible for 2 things. Number one, if somebody comes out of that catastrophic event without needing to have major surgery done to their heart in the first place, their heart will be stronger and more capable of continuing to beat and keep them alive and active on a go-forward basis. And the second was, in many cases, to avoid having to go through a transplant at all. Now, that was a wild idea when they first started talking about that, which was right around the turn of the century. But as is often the case in this whole world of discovery and inquiry, little by little, over time, they made their case and they proved it. And today, they have about $500 million in revenue. They're about a $5 billion market cap company. They have operations in Berlin and in Tokyo and in Danvers, Massachusetts. I kind of like that. Berlin, Tokyo, Danvers. But the point here is they were cutting a ribbon today on a doubling of their operational space at their corporate headquarters, and a big part of it is about expanding their lab capability, their research capability, and their ability, because of the connected nature of the world we all live in today, to provide literally real-time guidance and advice to clinicians who are using their product and their products all over the world. And they had a number of people there as part of this ceremony who were the first to receive a series of interventions associated with their product portfolio. Living, breathing, real-life folks who probably wouldn't be with us today if it hadn't been for their willingness and their genius to follow through, to chase this new opportunity when the discovery and the inquiry went this way instead of this way, and to create a company that's doing great things from an economic point of view, but has also changed the game in many respects with regard to what we think is possible when someone's dealing with a stroke or a catastrophic event involving their heart. And all I could think to myself was, in many ways, that is the life science story. You know, it basically began with what I will call inquiry and discovery, then went to invention and reinvention, and eventually to product, and then to delivery and follow-through. And they're charting a whole new path that certainly when they got started, and probably within the last 10 or 15 years, would have been considered pretty much outside the bounds of what's possible, which is in some ways what really makes this industry and the people who support it and invest in it so special. Because sometimes you're working on a piece of parchment that's already got a lot of other stuff on it, and sometimes you're literally starting from scratch. And the process that you're involved in is not one where necessarily anybody knows how it ends. But in many ways, it's that willingness to think differently and to be part of this ecosystem here that gives Massachusetts the lift that comes with having this community located here. And I'm not just talking about the real estate lift. I'm well aware of the fact that not too far from here is some of the most expensive real estate, certainly on the East Coast, maybe on planet Earth. And I will always, yeah, right, I laugh about that too. But I think a lot about that. Why would people pay $90 a square foot or more to be here? Because when I went to college, this was kind of a scary neighborhood. And as we all know, it wasn't that long ago. But one of the great things that's happened over the course of the past 30 years or so is the knowledge transfer, which has been brought on by both the development of new knowledge, but also the capacity to take that new knowledge and do something with it, has gotten so much more sophisticated that it's created just an explosion of aspirations and possibilities. Now for us, that gives us all kinds of things we can brag about. Talk about being the #1 state for innovation. We talk about being the #1 state overall, according to U.S. News and World Report. We talk about being the #1 state in terms of R&D dollars spent as a percent of GDP and as a per capita investment. It's the #1 state for NIH funding as a percent of GDP. #1 in terms of life sciences employment per capita. #1 in percent of our workforce working in STEM occupations. And this list just goes on and on and on and on. And it's because of the growth and success of this cluster over the course of several decades. And it's also borne significant fruit for us in a variety of other areas as well. And I'll just give you a couple of examples where that public-private partnership plays out. There's a big competition nationally to lead a $300 million engagement led by the federal government to choose where they were going to put their research center on the next generation of fabrics and materials. Sort of smart fabrics, if you want to put it in a different way. MIT led the charge, another neighbor. The Commonwealth put $40 million up. And we won that national competition, which is a $300 million plus engagement that involves research institutions, private organizations, for-profit businesses, and others to try and figure out what the next generation of smart materials and fabrics could look like. And there's a lot of places this can go. You imagine if we get to the point where you could design in a relatively inexpensive way fabric that can keep people cool or keep them hot, depending upon where they are in the globe at any point in time. Robotics manufacturing, another national competition. $250 million from a variety of federal sources. $5 million from us, being led again by a collection of colleges and universities and businesses here in Massachusetts. Biopharmaceutical manufacturing, another $250 million competitive bid from the feds. We put $20 million in. MIT, WPI, UMass Lowell, Quincy College, and a whole bunch of businesses provide the brain power, the knowledge, and the belief that it will actually go somewhere. We've also worked collaboratively with a whole bunch of existing organizations to help them build their footprint and expand their activity here. Whether you're talking about Alnylam, IBM Watson Health, Siemens, Pfizer, Shire, Abiomed, the one I visited today, and a host of others. And a lot of that was done in collaboration with our colleagues in local government, state government, the Life Sciences Center, and of course our partners in the private sector. It's great for the economy. It's great for our culture. It's great for our reputation. There's a special place to chase this sort of thing. But it also makes a big difference, this inquiry and discovery, and what happens to real people who live real lives and are looking for the folks in this community to help them solve problems that in many cases are life and death. I spend a fair amount of time talking to Jay and Travis about which one's taller. Because it ain't me. About the success of the Life Science Center and what the next act of that should look like. And I'm going to give you some thoughts on this one that I would describe as a little bit past spitballing, but not quite the final product. We'll have more to say about this at some point later this year. But based on the conversations that Travis and Jay and others have had with this community, there's sort of four big elements where we can probably play a positive and important role. The first is in workforce development, which is going to be a big issue, not just in your industry, but in a whole bunch of others for the foreseeable future. And that can translate into a lot of different things. I was actually out at the Quaboag Regional Middle School in Brookfield last week. Now, that's not exactly the kind of place where you would normally think about Quaboag Regional Middle School in Brookfield and Life Science Center. But if you walk into the school, almost all their lab equipment and a lot of the stuff they have in their science classrooms, they got from a grant from the Mass Life Science Center. You got a whole bunch of kids, high schoolers mostly, because this was a 7 to 12 middle school. I've never heard of a 7 to 12 middle school before. Learned something new. But you had all these kids in there working away on a variety of projects of one type or another. And everywhere I went, I was told about how much they appreciated the help they got from the Mass Life Science Center. So whether you're talking about high school kids or developing college curricula or associate degree curricula, there's no question that we, the Commonwealth, need to work with our partners in academia and in skill building around ensuring that we have the talent and the people we need playing in the spaces we need them to play in, to continue to grow the space here. Internships and apprenticeships. Great opportunity for us to put the real world together with what people are interested in and are being educated in the STEM fields are getting out of their education experience. So that's number one. Number two, R&D partnerships. Now, whether those are in drug discovery or clinical trials or therapeutic advances, we're never going to be the first dollar in, but there are plenty of opportunities where we can be what I would describe as the stitching that closes the deal. And the Life Science Center has proven over the course of the past few years that it has the discipline and the opportunistic sense to know when it makes sense to do that sort of thing. And there are certainly going to be opportunities for it to continue to play that role going forward. The third is to try to accelerate convergence. Now, on some level, I have absolutely no idea what that means, but I'll tell you what I think it means. So there's this really interesting dynamic that's going on between science, engineering, and data. And that factors its way into the way you think about medical device technology or biotech products or pharmaceuticals generally. And as we get better and better at managing information, and as the tool building capability of just engineering generally gets better and better, there are going to be chances and opportunities to put those things together to create products and solutions that left to one might not get there. And I'll tell you a simple story about this. When I was the CEO at Harvard Pilgrim, I used to go out and visit a lot of my accounts. And I was out visiting Draper Labs, which was one of my accounts, which at that point was really in the optical business. You know, satellites from the sun that could take pictures of your kids in the backyard swimming in the pool. And I was just, they did the tour and walked around, and I talked to all their employees about stuff. And then I was sitting there with the CEO, and I said, so I got the general idea about what goes on here. Do you have any, are you guys doing some interesting stuff you think I should know about that might relate to healthcare? And he said, yeah, actually, we are. And he pointed out the window right across the Charles River Basin. He pointed at Mass Eye and Ear. And he said, we've been working on a project with Mass Eye and Ear that you'd think was probably pretty interesting. And I said, what is it? He said, well, they're dealing with trying to create new therapies for people who have macular degeneration issues. And he said the problem for people who have issues with that is the degeneration takes place over time, and it's painful and it's difficult and it's terrible. But the only treatment that's available up to this point in time to either slow it or stop it is a direct application of that treatment into their eye, which usually involves a needle. And he said, as a result, believe it or not, most people would rather just have their eye deteriorate than have somebody stick a needle in it. Now, one of the things we're really good at is nano manufacturing. We make these teeny little devices that go in some of our optical products that we got talking to them about it and said, you know, I bet we could make one of those devices that you could turn into kind of a drug-eluting device. Where you can, instead of having somebody have to get the thing as a direct shot, what we could do is we could take this teeny little device and you could work with us to figure out how to put the drug in it, and then you could flip it under somebody's eyelid, and then the medicine would just elute out of that, and it would be obviously a heck of a lot less painful, and people might actually take the drug and the opportunity associated with that. I said, geez, that's brilliant. And I said, how much would that cost? And he said, well, this is what I remember. I could be wrong. It was a long time ago. I think what he said was it would cost $800,000 a whack at first, which of course is what you might expect to hear from a defense contractor. But over time, he said, over time, as you made more of them, you know, the price would come down, and And for the people who are dealing with this particular problem, it'd be a great solution. But I literally sat there and I thought to myself, biology, engineering, science, manufacturing. Really interesting combination that only happened because they happen to be on on opposite sides of the tidal basin. But as more and more science becomes what I would describe as particular, and as more and more data becomes manageable, sortable, and informative, and as engineering processes get more and more precise and sophisticated, the possibilities with respect to what you can do, not just with products, but also with the way you deliver them and the way the therapies are applied, it's going to get really interesting. And that's a place where I think we can probably help. And then the final one is to continue to invest in job creation. This is another place where I believe the Life Science Center has proven it can be opportunistic and disciplined. It can partner with people when it makes sense to partner with them, and it can be kind of the final piece to a proposal or a decision to either expand an existing operation, locate a new operation, or reconfigure something. And we've gotten to the point where I believe a lot of the math associated with what the return on that investment looks like is supportable. But as I said, those are where we are. That's kind of where the conversation is at this point, and I fully expect you hear a lot more from us about this later in the year. I do want to mention two other issues that don't have much to do with science, but I know they matter to you guys. One is we are continuing to make significant investments in the core operations of our public transportation system, which, given where a lot of you all are located and how you get your people to and from work and home, makes a big difference. And one of the most interesting things that happened to me after I got this job in the winter of 2014 and the breakdown of the T and all the rest was how many people in this industry said to me, yeah, the life science stuff, that's important, but God, fix the T! So what I would say to you is over the course of the next several years, this is what's going to happen. An infrastructure, power signals, power system signals, switches, tracks, that's all 50 to 100 years old, a lot of that's going to get replaced. And it's going to go from being mechanical to being something that's a little closer to digital. You're going to start to see new trains on the orange line and the red line in 18 and 19, and you'll see a lot more of them in 20, 21, 22. And those trains, combined with the investments we're going to make in the infrastructure, among other things, will mean that instead of having the trains run 5 minutes apart, which is what they have to do now for safety purposes, they'll be able to run 2 to 2.5 minutes apart. Now, if you can run a train that's actually, and by the way, the doors are bigger, everything about them is sort of looks like something that's at least out of the 21st century, which is really good. One of the first things Stephanie Pollock, our transportation secretary, said to me when we were in the midst of all the snow in 2015, she said, Governor, a lot of those trains were running in the blizzard of '78 too. Same ones. So stop complaining. But the point here is, as this evolves, and it's believe me, it is a major source of focus and investment in what folks are up to at the T. We're going to be able to basically double our capacity on the orange line and red line with what will be a very modern infrastructure underneath what will be a new set of trains running on top, which are basically being assembled in Springfield. And the great thing about the Springfield assembly piece is it creates jobs in Springfield, but it also gives them a beachhead to bid on other work in the U.S. And they've started to win contracts to do this work for other transit systems around the United States, which means it's going to be an ongoing and a terrific source of economic opportunity for folks in Western Mass. And the second thing I just want to mention, we've probably put about 9,000 units of affordable and workforce housing into the mix with our money and with Mass Housing's money and with private developer money over the course of the past couple of years. And we'll probably continue to do that over the course of the next several years. We're one of the largest landowners in Greater Boston. A lot of the property we own is located near transportation. A lot of it's on main streets. Our ability to leverage that property in conjunction with bond cap money that we have available, plus tax credits, plus some of the money that Mass Housing can bring to the table, I think that gives us the opportunity and the possibility to create a lot of housing that young families and college graduates will be able to live in and still be able to get to and from where they work in a reasonable period of time. And this is an issue I know about firsthand because I have a son who's 23 who lives in South Boston. And he lives kind of in the kitchen of the apartment that he's in because there are 5 of them in a, you might call it a 3-bedroom apartment. I think it's probably a 2-bedroom apartment with this little area they call a bedroom. And they're paying a lot of money for it. Now, they're happy to be there because they love the proximity to everything that's around them. But for us to really be successful, in addition to the stuff we need to do to help you with workforce and growth, is we need to give you a modern, reliable, and dependable public transportation system for your workforce and a continued investment in housing stock that young people and young families can afford to live in so that they can continue to work for you. The final thing I'll say is Bob has done a terrific job of working with us and with you to make sure that your issues and your concerns are understood and communicated, and he has a collaborative spirit that makes him a great guy to work with, and we are enormously pleased to have this kind of working relationship, and we continue to believe that you are not only an important part of our economy, but you solve a lot of problems for a lot of people who don't have a lot of other options, and you should be enormously proud of that. Thank you.